This is the third installment of my instructional video on handguns. If you guys missed my first and second videos, feel free to go back, check them out. That's going to help you with some of the wording I'm going to use. This video is geared towards the beginner type of shooter, so if you are a knowledgeable gun guy, you're probably just going to end up pulling your hair out. I'm also going to use hypotheticals and examples that may not technically be correct, and also terminology may be incorrect. As always, guys, I'm not the final word on this. This video is to help you guys get a little bit of knowledge. In this video, I'm going to explain what is meant by a double action only handgun. First, I'm going to go what a double action is in a revolver. The next thing is going to be double action in a hammer-fired semi-automatic handgun. And finally, we'll touch on what a double action striker-fired handgun is as well. Getting these other pistols out of the way, we're going to focus here on the Smith & Wesson Model 19. Okay, so for this discussion, I'm going to use this Smith & Wesson Model 19 as a double action only revolver, in addition to our little snap gun here. And it is late at night, so I will be taking my snap caps out. So our little snap cap gun here, just a smaller size of our Smith & Wesson. The example we used in the single action video, a revolver hammer needs to be cocked back somehow. So in that single action video, if you guys watched it, our single action assigned to our trigger is going to be the release of this hammer. So we have to cock it back manually. You can see that always reaching up to cock this hammer, guys, is somewhat slow and disruptive to our shooting. So we're constantly coming up here, firing the pistol, constantly coming up, firing the pistol. So you can see how disruptive that it would be to our sight picture. With the next advancement in firearms technology is the double action only. So with the movement of the trigger, the double action refers to the two tasks coordinated with the rearward pull of the trigger. The first task, as we can see here, is going to be physically cock our hammer or pull it to a point at which it would be metaphorically cocked. About right there. The second task would be to release the hammer or to fire that hammer to end up firing the gun. With our snap gun, we can illustrate that as well. If we try to do this in a single action motion with this gun, and this is why I like this example, our hammer doesn't lock back. So this is truly a double action only revolver. Pulling our hammer back would do nothing but bring it back to the cock position and releasing it. So that does really nothing. We physically have to pull this trigger, and if you remember, the two tasks assigned to pulling that trigger, or the double action assigned to pulling this trigger, is going to be to draw that hammer back or to cock that hammer, and then to release it once it's that predetermined cock position. So right there. First task is going to be cock our hammer. Second task is going to be release our hammer and fire our pistol. It's that simple, guys. A double action only revolver. So one great benefit to this double action only revolver is the ability to stay on target for quick follow-up shots. As you can see, I'm not constantly having to change my grip, and I'm just firing. I'm not always coming up here to cock our hammer. So let's get into what a double action only hammer fired semi-automatic handgun would be. Alright, for this example, I'm going to use this Beretta M9 compact. I'm going to be treating like this is a D model, where it only operates in a double action only function. I can easily show you the double action only with the hammer fired M9. As we see with the rearward movement of the trigger, the first task assigned to that motion is going to be bring our hammer back to a pre-cocked position, and the second task is going to be releasing that hammer to actually fire the pistol. So then after the pistol would fire, our slide would come back. And our hammer would be released to the full forward position. At that point, we would have to again engage the trigger by pulling it back to cock the hammer as the first task, and then that second task in the double action would be to release that hammer. The benefit to this system is the ability to double strike a round that may not have gone off the first time. So if we have some bad ammo, pull the trigger and nothing happens, we have the ability to pull the trigger and fire again. Also, the ability to carry the pistol in a loaded condition with a round in the chamber and no manual safety, but relying on that heavy trigger pull to deter any accidental discharge of the gun. So a round would be inside the chamber, and because we are doing those two actions just by sheer physics, we are adding more mechanism and more mechanical movement to the rearward pull of that trigger, so we have an inherently heavy trigger pull. So that's going to not completely alleviate, but that's going to discourage any accidental pull of this trigger. So with the double action hammer fired semi-automatic pistol out of the way, we'll talk briefly about the double action only striker fired pistol. So with this portion, unfortunately, I do not have a striker fired double action only pistol. The double action only striker fired handguns, they shadow the hammer fired just as did the single action. Keeping this in mind, the rearward movement of the trigger will perform the two tasks that we talked about. First, cocking the striker, which would be like cocking the hammer in our revolver. And the second one would be releasing that striker forward to fire the gun. It's important to note that once the pistol fires, the striker is not retained in a cocked position. It returns forward to a resting position so that the trigger can repeat the process of cocking and firing the striker in one continuous motion. So like we discussed about, the two tasks assigned to the trigger pull are going to be to cock our striker inside of here. So we would pull our trigger, which would cock our striker, and then we'd finish our trigger pull off, which would release that striker to fire the round. Simple as that. In conclusion, guys, we talked about what is meant by a double action only revolver, where we assigned two tasks to our trigger pull. The first task is going to be to cock our hammer, and the second task is going to be releasing our hammer to fire the pistol. We talked about a double action only hammer fired semi-automatic pistol, our Beretta M9 here. The first task that we assign to that trigger is the same. First is going to be to cock our hammer. The second task, or the double of the double action in the trigger, is going to be releasing that hammer to fire that pistol. And finally, we wrapped up on what was meant by the double action striker fired. Basically, all we're doing is replacing our hammer of our hammer fired semi-automatic pistol with an internal striker of this XD, and it's going to draw that striker back to a certain cocked position, and whenever we finish our trigger pull, it's going to release our striker forward. It's important to note, guys, that when you pull these triggers, it's a heavier trigger pull, and it doesn't automatically fire the pistol. There are different stages, as you can see here with the Beretta. The first stage is going to do kind of a half-cocked. The second stage is going to go back to the full-cocked. And then the third stage of this trigger pull is going to physically release that hammer. So it's a smoother trigger pull, however, it is somewhat stiff. It is not just automatic pull and fire per se. So I hope this helped you guys out. You keep a lookout for the next video where I'm going to discuss the double action, single action pistols. Once again, if you guys like what you saw, or if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them below. I'm always trying to answer questions for y'all as much as I can. I'm not the end-all source. Like I say, this is to help you guys out and give you a little bit of knowledge so you feel a little bit more confident.